Good evening. My name is Brooke Steinhauser. I'm the program director at the Emily Dickinson Museum. I'm thrilled to be here with you tonight. And you are very welcome to the May installment of our 2022 Phosphorescence Poetry Reading Series. Emily Dickinson used the term phosphorescence to describe a divine spark or an illuminating light. And we launched this series during the pandemic in 2021 in celebration of the power of poetry to spark the imagination and ignite transformation. So we are just thrilled to return with another year of virtual readings running monthly now through December, bringing you established and emerging poets from all over the globe. We at the Emily Dickinson Museum are just delighted to be making contact with you. And since we can't see you in our audience tonight, we hope that you'll consider doing as some of you have already begun to do and chiming in the chat, which is always just so heartening to see you there with your words of appreciation and affirmation. We hope you'll keep that up for our poets tonight, and we'll be sure to share the chat record with them after the show. And you're welcome to start right now by telling us where it is that you're tuning in from, if you would like. And I see that we already have some folks who are from Kansas. We have another Kansas Poet Laureate here this evening. How auspicious. We've got Salem, Massachusetts. We have Wyoming, North Carolina, Greece, Colorado, Nebraska, Pennsylvania. Just an absolute pleasure. California is here. Hello from Germany. We're so glad to be with you. So we just have a few notes before we begin with our reading. You'll note that we are enabling Zoom's auto transcription feature. It generates closed captions to the best of the computer's ability. There will be some errors in transcription along the way. We apologize for that. You can choose to turn this feature on or off. And to do that, you just need to go to the live transcript button at the bottom of your Zoom toolbar. Tonight's program is going to last 1 hour, and we're going to start with some readings and end with some conversation. So we do invite you to participate if you would like by adding any questions that you have for the poets to the Q&A feature as we go. And the Q&A feature is down below in your toolbar as well. And we'll be sure to get to any questions that we see pop up there for the end of our conversation. So now, without further ado, it's my great pleasure to introduce tonight's poets to you. We'll be beginning with Meg Kearney, whose book All Morning the Crows was published in spring 2021 and was the winner of the 2020 Washington Prize for Poetry. It made Small Press Distribution's poetry bestseller list, April through September 2021, and was nominated for a Pushcart Prize, as well as the New Hampshire Book Award and Forward Review's Best Book of the Year. Meg is also author of An Unkindness of Ravens and Home by Now, winner of the Penn New England LL Winship Award. A Heroic Crown, The Ice Storm, published as a chapbook in 2020, and 3 verse novels for teens. Meg's poetry has been featured on Garrison Keillor's A Writer's Almanac and Ted Kuser's American Life in Poetry series, and included in the 2017 Best American Poetry Anthology. She lives in New Hampshire and directs the Solstice MFA in Creative Writing program at LaSalle University in Massachusetts. And we're putting all of the websites for these wonderful poets in the chat as we speak. Next up, we'll have Quentin Collins, a writer, editor, and Solstice MFA program assistant director. His work appears in many print and online publications, and his first full-length collection of poems is The Dandelion Speaks of Survival, which came out in April 2021. His second collection of poems, Claim Tickets for Stolen People, selected by Marcus Jackson as winner of the journal's 2020 Charles B. Wheeler Prize, is forthcoming from the Ohio State University Press in 2022. Quentin's awards include a Pushcart Prize and the 2019 Atlantis Award from the Poets Billow, and his other accolades include Best of the Net nominations. Finally, we'll hear from Denise Lowe, Kansas Poet Laureate from 2007 to 2009, and winner of the Red Mountain Press Editor's Choice Award for Shadow Light. Other books include The Turtle's Beating Heart, One Family's Story of Lenape Survival, Wing, and A Casino Bestiary. She edited a selection of poems by William Stafford in an edition with essays by other poets and scholars. Lowe is also a founding board member of Indigenous Native Poets, She's a past board president of the Associated Writers and Writing Programs. She's won fellowships from the Kansas Art Commission and recognition from the Poetry Society of America, the Circle, Best Native American Books, and the National Endowment for the Humanities. And she currently teaches for Baker University's School of Professional and Graduate Studies. So again, we'll be posting these links so you can learn more about each of these poets during the readings tonight. And we hope you will check out the books that they have available online. Poets, thank you so much for being here tonight. And we're going to ask Meg to kick off our readings.
Thank you so much, Brooke, and Elizabeth, who's doing all the tech behind the scenes, and the Emily Dickinson Museum. And thank you to all of you out there for being here this evening. I know I have a lot of friends out there in the audience, and I really, really appreciate your support. So I'm going to start off by reading a very short poem that was written by Cameron Penny, who was a fourth grader in 2001. And I heard this poem soon after the 9/11 attacks here in the United States, that September of 2001. And Cameron Penny was given an assignment in his class to write a poem, and this is what he wrote. If you are lucky enough in this life, a window will appear on a battlefield between two armies. When the soldiers look into the window, they don't see their enemies. They see themselves as children, and they stop fighting and go home and go to sleep. When they wake up, the land is well again. I don't think I have to tell anyone why I wanted you to hear that poem and why I'm going to continue to share it as long as it feels necessary. So I'm going to read just actually 3 poems this evening, a short one, and then a long poem, and then another short poem. I'll be reading just from the new book, All Morning the Crows. And every poem in the book is the name of a bird. Each title is the name of a bird, but they're not really poems about birds, which you will see. Birds are really my launching off point, if you will. So we're going to start with Owl, which is the first poem in the book. Owl. She birthed you, but she is so unknowable. Is that the word? Try nocturnal. Each night she glides on wings silent as a vole quivering under snow. Perched on your bedroom sill, she watches you dream twitch, then spins her head to spy the snow mound ripple, sugary in moonlight, as the vole tunnels past pines. She lifts off, silent, still, and you, daughter of hurt and squeal, are awake. When you sigh, your heart-shaped face aches. Is that the word? Try breaks. Knowing when she dies, you'll inherit all she's swallowed whole, yet had to leave behind. So that's actually a good introduction to Crow, which is the long poem I will read next. It takes about 8.5 minutes for me to read the poem, but it's in 25 short sections, kind of Emily Dickinson size sections, which I hope makes it a little bit more digestible. Crow. It was a crow first taught me how to pry a thing open, snatch a stick to leverage a headstone, or widen the hole in a rotten pine's trunk to get at the story inside. New York, 1999. If our mother had kept you, my newly found sister said, you'd never have gone to college, wouldn't have done a lot of things you've done. Ornithologists claim crows have an innate sense of fairness. One will scoff at your proffered raisin, for example, if you've given her sister 2 peanuts. If you've given her sister away, that's a fact best kept cached, like the crow's scraps of roadkill and white oak acorns. I wasn't first apprentice to the crow, first to learn that old term crowbar, handy for getting at grubs and slugs or warding off a man with a brick for a fist. Flip the bar around to hook a beetle, but not a mother, not a sister. If she had kept me? A rooster crows, crows caw. Explain that. And while you're at it, how you came to laugh my mother's laugh, my newly found sister said. I said, I never claimed to be anyone's interpreter. She said, our. I meant to say, our mother. Rhode Island, 1960. Hear that? Crows are songbirds too, squawk the nuns in their choir loft. See the one with a little silver cross in her beak, jimmying the blue gold window's latch? That's her, my first mother. Our mother told me, my newly found sister said. She went to Catholic boarding school. I said, well, the convent. Our mother did not speak a secret language. She spoke the language of secrets. As any ex-nun would tell you, the world isn't simply black and white. Consider a plum in a crow's mouth in sunlight. Consider the nun's habit sunk to its knees in the confessional's dark. Color of a broken vow, iridescent as a cancer cell. Apprentice, yes, I told my newly found sister. Ravens? You have to work your way up to ravens. Corpses, cemeteries, what many people think when they hear crow, also known as the pallbearer of souls. By the time I found her, my first mother had already been dead 17 years. Why was I surprised? At her grave, I left a silver earring for the crows to find. Does anyone ever see a scarecrow and think crow? Cornfields, maybe, or Father, is that you? If you leave us, the nuns in Bristol told my first mother, you will die a terrible death. But she stole a dress blue as a baby crow's eye, plus 500 nickels, bought a bus ticket to Boston. The dress, a newly arrived novitiate's. Crow's eye blue, code for so sexy, it was in the to be burned bin. How did she go from Boston to New York to Tucson? Why didn't she tell us about you? My newly found sister wants to know. She now thinks I have the knowledge of crows. From the crow's nest of her getaway ship, my first mother could have seen nothing useful. Not the snake charmer with his charming snake, or Prince Charming, or how a daughter can shrink to a name on a dotted line, to one wide brown eye on the horizon before falling off the edge of her world. In Scotland, crows are corbies. Granddad never lost his brogue, my newly found sister said. She said she could still hear him singing about the twa corbies who feast on a dead knight's bonny blue eyes. When still in her sister Gabriella disguise, my first mother taught second grade. All those children, not one of them hers. Snack time milk box cost 5 cents, added up. Fact, crows can recognize human faces, even remember them years later. The first time I saw my mother in a photograph, I thought it was some sort of trick mirror. Hello, I said, I know you. You are she when I last remember her well, my newly found sister said. No place for a ship in Arizona, meaning no daily departures leaving from Boston or New York, where I was harbored. Was that the allure? To be far from the Atlantic, its relentless chant, though the desert is its own type of sea. She was given a photograph of me to keep. Grief came in waves like the heat. On overcast days before clocks, Jews began the Sabbath when crows came home to roost. Crows don't need a timepiece. Sunsets when all the good stuff starts to happen. Arizona, 1983. This is the story I've been told, with a few guesses thrown in. Round and around my first mother's deathbed flew the sisters of Bristol, that murder of crows. I have another daughter, she whispered to her husband, Lowe, so her children would not hear. He promised to find me, thinking this would make her live. Told you so, chanted the crows, settling like a wreath at her feet. How did she get to Tucson? Some say the southern route, a brand new Corvair convertible. I say she flew. And I am going to finish with the last poem in the book, which is Sparrow. And there's an epigraph from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology that says, the house sparrow takes frequent dust baths. It throws soil and dust over its body feathers, just as if it were bathing in water. Sparrow. Saint Bede said, the soul is a sparrow. It flits in one door, flutters down a hall, disappears out another door. A brownish black, soon forgotten flash. Sparrow. The word itself from the Anglo-Saxon means a flutterer. To flutter is to float. Sparrow on waves, sparrow on a pond. Or flutter is to contract, to beat irregularly. Sparrow in my heart. or to tremble with excitement. I could barely contain my sparrow. If water flutters, there's more than a ripple. This morning, a sparrow splashes in the garden dirt like a baby in the tub. A soul, perhaps celebrating its former body returned as promised to dust. Oh, my very being wants to believe, but my faith, that sparrow, flutters. So when my grave's been dug, when they lower my dust into the ground, may a host of sparrows bathe with me. May we fling that fresh earth skyward, then lift our faces as it rains back down. Thank you, everyone. And thanks again to the Emily Dickinson Museum. Thanks so much.
Thank you to Meg for that wonderful reading. Thank you again to our host, and thank you to Denise. It's nice to meet you and read with you. I'm going to read 7 poems tonight, 3 from the Dandelion Speaks of Survival, 3 from Claim Tickets for Stolen People, and 1 from this new thing I'm working on. So the first one from the Dandelion Speaks of Survival is called Signs of Life. And interesting that every time Meg and I read together, we always seem to have a 9/11 connection at the same point. So that's going to be my first poem as well that I'm going to read. So it's called Signs of Life. Day nurse and night nurse mark the hours when you're a kid in the hospital. Count seconds with the IV flow rate, how it ticks liquid into your body. 2 years ago, mortality lived on your TV 24/7. In a dust cloud, first responders removed rebar, concrete, steel beams to locate signs of life beneath the remains of the towers. You craned your neck up at every plane. If you could see orange on the fuselage, you were in danger. If you saw orange flags, you were in danger. Now you see your rubble, this wreckage of leads and tape beneath your gown. You assumed a plane or a dirty bomb, not your body performing the inside job. Night nurse draws blood. Day nurse draws blood. A therapist searches for signs of depression. In New York, to promote hope, 2 columns of light pierce the night. You smile to promote the lie that you're not afraid of death, that your notions of long life weren't in a pile of ash after September 11th, 2001. We didn't stop flying airplanes. The medicine isn't stopping the ulcers that bleed in your body. You don't stop watching airplanes until the flags say you can stop. You can't leave until the doctor says you can leave. These thoughts detonate again and again. Orange flags fly again. So this next poem, a little lighter, this is called The Chicken Wing Speaks of Love. And this poem, I like to tell the story of this because I wrote this because a coworker of mine was really disgusted at the idea of eating chicken wings in public, not because they're bad, but he just said they're so messy. Like, how can you do it? I'm just like, because they're amazing, and it doesn't matter what anyone thinks about how messy you look. So this is a poem called The Chicken Wing Speaks of Love. Maybe you don't understand what it means to love with hunger, to pull apart and gnaw goodness, its veins hooked in your teeth. I'm tenderness you pick clean from bone, massage from your molars with your tongue. How else can you peel back a lover's skin, wade into the fat, consume something whole? Nibble the gristle in my love, wads of napkins translucent with grease. Fry me hard, split me, drumette from wingette, undress me, breading from tips, devour your palate, lemon pepper purified, tongue, mild sauce, blessed. Don't you know love is messy? How can you not crave this filth, a love that leaves a pile of bones? And so the last poem from this book is going to be the title poem, The Dandelion Speaks of Survival. When they see me rise, a nebula of corona sunburst spires strewn across their bluegrass lawns, they will come for me. When my roots fan a maze around their chrysanthemums, interlace a cage around their petunias, grab the life I am so often denied, they will come for me. They will come for me when I yawn from a driveway fissure, when my leaves sprawl over their gravel beds. They will come with hands clenched, garden shears to snap their jaws, weed whackers to split my body, chemicals that wither and disintegrate me. They will come with mower blades sharp, thunder of gasoline combusting in the engine. They will come with tillers and hoes and rakes and knives and torches. Don't they know that when the wind rocks my halo, I cast seeds into the sky? I clutch earth tighter than English bluebells. I survive their hands and their instruments. I survive every way they spill my bitter milk. I survive, I survive, I survive, I survive again and again. When they sharpen new tools, when they arm themselves with professional grade sprays, call landscapers to scrape out my existence, call me weed, call me nuisance, call me pest, say I am not welcome, poison this soil to stunt my growth. Know that I survive. I spring forth a field of gold. My petals kissed by morning dew, I bloom like the sun spills over the horizon. I stretch my stem and roots beyond all borders. I will split this concrete and the earth. And now, on to book number 2. So I usually like to think of what I'm going to read as like a story, like, what's the story of tonight's reading? And I think this was just like a night where I was like, okay, I just need to give everybody a little sampling of everything. Because I haven't done that in a while. Usually it's like, okay, let's read all the poems that do this thing. But I think this is nice. And it gives me a nice way to get to the new thing, which is gonna actually book in with the first thing. So actually, yes, I did do a story. I'm sorry, I just lied to you all. I know it's early in the reading, but I had to do it at least once. But this first poem from Claim Tickets is what I would ask about Barack's post-racial White House. And one of the key recurring things in this book is I only recently had come to understand what Barack Obama's presidency meant for me as a Black individual in this country, and not only interrogating the momentous nature of that, but also what happened after, and kind of how things were going during. So, again, this is what I would ask about Barack's post-racial White House. What manner of gospel raised Barack Hussein Obama on Sunday mornings in the White House? Muscle memory of mop bucket and vacuum on the Sabbath. Who awakened his hands? Smokey Norfolk, Yolanda Adams, Mary Mary. In this hand-me-down house, spine and rib frames behind the sheetrock, how often did Barack sleep late on a Saturday? Or did the voices never stop their whispers in his ears? I saw what he wrought upon his souls. I imagined the dead beneath the south lawn could snare a root around his toes if he did not tread with caution. Am I asking too much of the mountain that I raised for him? No, these questions are supposed to be for Barack, not my illusion that on November 4th, 2008, we buried this country's history in Grant Park. We lowered it into the dirt, threw confetti on the grave, or so I thought, but these questions aren't for me. These questions are for a Black man in a tan suit in charge of white America. Final question. Barack said Trayvon Martin could have been his son. In that moment, did he know he shouldered a cross that could drag him back down Golgotha? It happened, but I stared at the hilltop and I haven't looked toward the ground since. And so this next poem is called Bridge Strike on Storrow Drive. So for people who are not familiar with the Boston area, there's this lovely little, I guess you call it a highway that runs along the Charles River here called Storrow Drive. And it's a low clearance kind of place to drive. And it's a recurring thing here that every September when everyone's moving, a lot of people get U-Haul trucks and don't know you can't drive on it and end up running into the bridges. It happens for other reasons too throughout the year, but September is notorious for it. And so this is kind of based on a prompt that I had for an anthology around like this idea of touch. And I was like, okay, so like, what's it like when that bridge touches that truck that slams into it? So again, this is a bridge strike on Storrow Drive. Metal touching metal, gnarl me into wreckage, shear my scalp from my skull as we collide. My sides bulge, then break. My cargo scatters beneath this bridge so sudden, my produce crates. Bed that slept in many apartments, now debris on Storrow Drive, this overpass. Why do I always bring the fire to your eye beams, smoke and oil, lights and sirens, congestion and car horns? I don't interrupt traffic flow just to mar your paint. I like your graffiti. More than clearance signs, you hover over space where rain stops for a moment. Your shadow could embrace my side view mirrors. Look, you are the bridge. I am the truck. Foot to some floor, still heaving as a heavy thing does. I race to crash these many Septembers when my metal met your metal. Guts and gears swept to the shoulder. Not the collision or clash. It's my hoping each time, if even for seconds, that I'll coast under your steel, that you will be my shelter. And so this next poem, it's called Reynolds Wrap Leftovers. And I don't think there's really any major setup for this one other than my grandfather, my mother's father, used to work at the Reynolds aluminum plant in Chicago before he retired when I was, I think, a kid at some point. I think he was there that long. Casserole dish, room temp memory, half-eaten aluminum. I clatter off the roll, crackle over leftover meals, peaks, valleys, crinkles, hem smoothed over the Pyrex pants lip, baked macaroni or peach cobbler, cobbled armor, jagged ridges, lunchbox sandwich sheath, sheets, shimmer, sheets, spun round cardboard swords for Halloween, Tin Man trappings, chrome sphere, cocked backed, arced, free throw basketball, trash, cookie crumb, collateral damage. I pull too much. Try to rewind it around the roll. Now crinkled again, I pull. Sheet zippered against sharp waves, ripped like skin when a thumb nicks the cutter, uneven tear, extra shrapnel, fistfuls, fragment, carnage, clutter, loose scraps, kitchen drawer stuffed, save a morsel, rough edge, like an old Bulova watch, retirement gift for my grandfather's years at Reynolds Metal Company, the McCook plant engraved on the case, his grave, the gun salute. My uncle places the watch in my palm so that I can save a piece of his father for later. And so this final poem is from, I don't know what I hope will turn into a book at some point, but I've been already working on it for a year, and I continuously say this might be my, like, takes me 10 years to write book because I'm very much taking my time with it. But it's dealing a lot with digging into the chronic illness a bit. I mentioned it a little bit in my first book in a few poems, and that was more so focused on the childhood aspect of it. And as this develops, I'm kind of reaching into, how experiencing that as an adult works with a lot of other themes that are also tied into the ideas of my relationship with religion. So this is a poem called "The Syntax of My Body Writes the Word of God." God's fingers fiddled cosmic dust. Each digit fluttered the grains, then swished and swirled the particles before pinching enough to herald my body into the Lord's palm. The dust cascaded to fabricate my limbs, granule by granule. God crafted the design that I must not question, only prostrate myself before the mystery. And here I stand. My own cosmos of shifting atoms, faith and doubt. I corkscrew through living while the unknown bays just off screen. I sputter to starts, screech to stops. Doctors record the gospel of my afflictions, stretch my intestines straight. The span spells demise. WebMD is the Lord's most beloved prophet and false god. I pray for a miracle. On sleepless nights, I guzzle nihilism and the last dregs of Catholic guilt, or Baptist, or the self-flagellation for sins I won't confess before a judge or the altar. Prepare the knife, for the syntax of my body writes the word of God, and I cannot decipher the handwriting. Free the tributaries that phoning fate into the music of my being. I will drift in their currents to the parent. Liberated from flesh, I may then ask the Lord, how much salvation can I buy with the blessings I labor to shoulder? The question mark of my spine. Absence of sound in my right ear, ulcers that punctuate my guts, errant curve of my eyes. Is the love prescribed in the pain or the healing thereafter? Believers say both. I cathedral my palms, leave the door open for God. At the advent, I will crumble it all to rubble, scatter the dust to land where it may. Thank you.
Okay, hi, that was fabulous. Thank you, Quentin. Thank you, Meg. This is just such a powerful experience. I appreciate it. Um, my favorite poem by Emily Dickinson is "A Narrow Fellow in the Grass." And I read that and I was just, that took me, as a high school student, like a day to parse it out and try to figure it out. And I was reminded of it, how objects live in language for us, and I love that the object-centered poem. And so this poem of mine began with a little quiver, a little zero at the bone, like that poem. And this is called "Party Spot on Geyser Peak," which is here in Sonoma County, California. Party spot on Geyser Peak. A used condom twists like a snake skin next to beer cans. A pink knit cap lies by a burned stub of a spliff. The party continues in discards arranged like a plein air painting, a still life. Who can mistake intoxication at this height overlooking Alexander Valley? Scenery dwarfed from our precarious ledge along the winding road, one lane in places, no shoulders, steep drops dizzying like the lovers hovering in space, no wiggle room, just clouds where God stair-stepped to the heavens and back down Jacob's ladder to hear. a place where earthquakes ripple from underground, where below steamy springs melt rocks. Across sky, the tiny smoke strands rise. Brush burns over there. Snake River, Shabakai, and Pomo below reflects snapshots of stars. Its current carries away love banter of partiers, tinny echo of cans. We breathe on an anchored gravel spit, quiet among empties and grass stubble. Cattle tilt sideways. They graze on grassy spires of sky islands, adrift in a sea of air. Another land-centered poem is Haskell Medicine Wheel. I taught at Haskell Indian Nations University for 25 years. And one of the art formations or spiritual formations that was created there is a circle with the 4 directions. And it's a place where people go to reflect and to make offerings. Haskell Medicine Wheel. The hearth in the middle smolders. Cedar limbs spark lava red. To the east stands a limestone marker tilted to equinox sunrise. Offerings cover the grainy surface. Red cloth tobacco ties, brass keys, eagle fluff, a silver dollar. To the west, another stela marks end of day. To the north, a stone is covered with quartz crystals, quills, a bear claw, pine. On the southern marker are robin feathers, buffalo nickels, corn, and obsidian arrowhead. Smoke drifts east, where stretches a thunderbird outline in grass, blue stem ripples in its earthbound wings. From a jack oak whistles a brilliant redbird. Matoaka, a portrait. And this is a quote from her, also known as Pocahontas. All must die. It's enough that the children live, that the child lives. All must die. 'Tis enough that the child lives. Pocahontas, days before death, poses, eyes clear, mouth straight, her face framed by drop earrings, braid-trimmed top hat. A flat lace collar chokes her neck. She grasps a 3-plumed fan, Holy Trinity or Heldry's Serenity. Rolf's crest, a wolf, repeats on her silver brocade blouse. She is Matoaka, daughter of Powhatan, kidnapped bride, rape survivor, London celebrity, mother of Thomas, Virginia Madonna in deep cuffed sleeves. She sits before the portraitist Simon de Pas, a woman, stern, old at 21. Ode to the Afternoon Moon. You float the azure sky like a golf ball tossed by a bored god this ordinary sunny day, no purpose but tides. At night, you shine like a street lamp without a pole. Oh yes, women depend on you. How else to measure blood and birth? The sheriff's helicopter churns below you and 6 crows blow like black scarves in wind. One crow appears to land on you, but slides sideways off your icy white orb, a snowman's head falling into an endless blue drift. Longman, Cherokee for river. Latin, riparia, ground torn open by water. Biblical, riverbank gathering place. Old French, riviere, Northern Pomo, Jabeda, Cherokee, Equoni, person, long, male. Trace my water bottle swig backwards to the faucet, to underground pipes, city pumping stations, and upstream, Rio Lindo, a Shabakai in Pomo, long snake, the being who sidewinds this mountain, a curlicue loop. Mist is its breath. Rainwater in our metal gutters gurgles and flows downslope, streams of tears, to what the song calls Old Man River, Cherokee and Latin put together, and Pomo, a benevolent long snake of life traveling through droughts and floods. On the bridge over a nameless creek, sea, swallows, blackberry bramble, arrowroot in the shallows, quivers of underwater fins, ripples, water, more water on the move. Going to read a poem about the fires that are part of climate change and part of our new experience. And this was the Walbridge fire in Sonoma County near where I live. This moment of danger, Walbridge fire 2020. Crows on pavement hop sideways, one-footed like the powwow dance, crow hop, but zigzag. In the half-light, feathers shine taffeta black, smoke from burning redwoods muddles sight. Masked strangers walk by us, not threatening, but shielding from an invisible plague born on breath. Lungs quiver inside our chests, thudding a two-step song of murmurs. Tsuno Mountain sits wordless as haze circles its ridgeline of pines and live oaks. Morning sun barely remembers to return to this moon valley of vineyards and goats. Months ago, I crowded into a bar to hear a band sing La Calle Está a Fuego, a song for dancing crows and for me. Fuego, fuego, fire, fire, streets aflame, danger and beauty. My husband and I just got back 2 days ago from visiting uncle and aunt on the Menominee Indian Reservation in northern Wisconsin. And this is an homage to aunt and uncle and all the family who they are bear hunters. Uncle got 7 bears a couple years ago with his pistol. He was 80. And this is called Bear Trap Falls Road. And I always wondered what happened for a road to be called Bear Trap Falls Road. Where a cave behind waterfalls once flooded and trapped a bear, where a snow-packed road through pine woods leads to aunt and uncle's house, where at night bears tear metal hoops off barrels and doors off sheds, where a bear once lumbered from the forest past snarling dogs to the house, where it scratched up against a light pole and snagged fir tufts 7 feet up, then it shat. Where uncle got a bear last fall using a pistol, shooting into its toothy maw, the open mouth, the only soft spot of the skull. Where, after cleaning carcasses, uncle throws bear guts along the timber line. Where eagles gather to tear apart red entrails. Where a granddaughter shot her first bear and stewed the meat with manaman wild rice. Where a cave in a branch of the Wolf River once flooded and drowned a bear. And I'm going to close with this poem, Memento. Again, it's an object poem. It's centered on my memory of a particular object. And it begins with an epigraph by Louise Gluck. We look at the world once in childhood, the rest is memory. In my first house of cut up puzzles, mother disappears behind jumbled heights, walls, window panes, a domain of no lullabies, but instead pauses. In a room under elms, stars pelt the glass, hunger returns. Under my chin, white ruffles loop endlessly. I remember to this day the curved bassinet, dusty pink, how I lived within its wicker. Later, she stored it on the porch where even now, years later, it calls me to return. Thanks so much for letting me be part of this.
Oh, thank you so much to each of these amazing poets. We heard first from Meg Kearney, then from Quentin Collins, and lastly from Denise Lowe. And you've just taken us everywhere tonight. And it's just been a real delight to hear from you. So thank you so much. This is a good chance. If you have questions for these poets, you are welcome to be part of our conversation tonight by placing your questions in the Q&A. I have a few, and so I think I'll go ahead and start us off. Meg, I am hoping that you might speak first just about what brought this group together to be part of our series. How do you know each other? How are you working in community with each other? And then I would invite Denise and Quentin and Meg to tell us what were you hearing in each other's work tonight that resonated with you?
Well, thank you again, Brooke, for being such a great host. And thank you everyone out there for being here this evening. And what an honor to read with Denise and with Quintin. Denise, I've known the longest, and I think we met on the Menominee Indian Reservation back in early 2000s or late 90s, maybe, or we met in Kansas. I used to run a program for the National Book Foundation where I brought authors to Indian reservations all across the country. And somehow I've been to Menominee and I've been to, well, no, I didn't get to the Kansas one. So we met along the road somewhere there. And then Quintin and I actually met when he was an undergrad at DePaul in Chicago. He had an organization that he started because he's a real community builder that brought poets to DePaul, and Quintin brought me to DePaul to read all those years ago. And then he ended up coming, because as you see, he's a phenomenal poet. He came to be a student at the Solstice MFA program, which I've been directing since we launched in 2006. So Hugh graduated 2018.
Yep, 2018.
And then he became our assistant director at the Solstice MFA program in 2019, just on the cusp of the pandemic. So, when I thought of putting the three of us together for this reading, I was thinking about how all of us write in our different ways about identity and about home. Mm-hmm. And I thought that would really tie us together. And I think it worked.
Yeah, the medicine wheel is all about solstice, so yeah.
I think that for me, in terms of what I'm hearing, one, I love when I see recurring images across different readers, because there's always a chain that somehow happens, even if it's not between everyone who reads, it's like between two people and then they link to the next person. But I think the piece about identity is definitely the one that comes through the most in terms of the ways in which we frame so much about ourselves, but also like the cultures in which we not only are in currently, but we've been in throughout our entire lives, like how you can like really hear it and see it in the work, and how that kind of creates a container in which we are maybe consciously or unconsciously working within, in terms of how we present different things. And yeah, it's something I've been thinking about a lot lately, for various reasons. And so now, of course, I'm like always hearing like, okay, so like, where are those little things? I'm just like, all right, like if you told me to say like, what's the form for Meg, or what's the form for Denise based on some of these signatures that I'm seeing, it's nice to pick those things up because, you know, I find that we all do them, but really starting to listen for what they may be is something that I see very clearly in all the readings tonight.
One of the things that I've been thinking about lately is because someone informed me they went to visit an astronomer with their class in New Mexico, is that the sounds don't disappear. This reading will continue to emanate into the universe forever. And and there's apparently certain places on Earth where you can hear things longer. And there's certain little dips that collect sound. But I love the idea that all of us are putting together our webbing of words. This language is a webbing. And yes, I think there's this identity that we are creating, but we're also expanding our identity by interacting with each other, with interacting with our ancestries, with interacting with our futures in this cosmic kind of expansiveness. That's all I have to say.
I love that. That's a beautiful idea, and the idea that you're not only creating that webbing with each other, but with voices from the past as well, which of course makes me think about Emily Dickinson. No surprises there. We're here tonight because of her. And there's something that I was feeling from your readings tonight, which is something I think we see sometimes in Dickinson, which is exploring ideas, sometimes notions of home, in the case of some of the readings tonight, through sense memory. I felt that I was hearing a lot of that tonight, whether that was the silver earring at the grave, or the bowl of chicken wings, or the bear entrails. And, you know, I think about a poem by Dickinson. I tie my hat, I crease my shawl. And she says, I put new blossoms in the glass and throw the old away. I push a petal from my gown that anchored there. I weigh the time, 'twill be 6 o'clock. That kind of engaging quality of sense memory. We think about Dickinson writing on these handy scraps of paper because as a memory or an idea is coming to her, she's kind of recording it right away in poem form. So for you, what is your approach? How do you unearth those sense memories when you sit down to write?
You know, I was appreciate, this is indirect, this isn't a direct answer, but indirectly, I was thinking, what came to me is Emily Dickinson's recipe for pound cake that a friend of mine always makes, a poet friend of mine always makes. And I think there's all this food in our reading today. And Quentin, I love that there was food in your work, and come to Sonoma County, you know, we're all foodies here. But you know, memory is so tied with the fundamentals of food, the smell, the aroma. And so that whiff of maybe I catch my husband's cooking, you know, roasting a beaver, which he did once. And it's unforgettable. I will never forget the smell of roasting beaver meat. It's rich and gamey. So that kind of thing propels me, and it compels me, propels and compels me to write something.
Yeah, I think the nature of that is kind of like, I've hit this interesting period in life where I just been unlocking a lot of memories lately. So I'll just be sitting and doing something, and something will happen to be like, oh, hey, here's this thing I completely forgot that happened. And it's not that I necessarily blocked it out or otherwise have been trying not to think about it, but it's just like, oh, hey, here's a thing that I used to like do as a kid or what happened. And it was very useful for writing my first book, which the whole first section is very based in my hometown of Country Club Hills, Illinois, which is 25 miles southwest outside of Chicago. And one of the challenges with kind of getting to that was me understanding like, oh, hey, like I need to really learn how to write the Country Club Hills poem because based on where I'm from, like I'm writing or trying to write a Chicago poem because like I live in the shadow of the major city that's near me and how that, affects the culture out there. So I was like, not only thinking about the place, but thinking about the time, what was it like when I was this age? What were the cultural markers? And so it was just really thinking about objects, how do I latch on to objects to build poems around? And the second book was very much in not necessarily like a thing object kind of focused project, but it was a topic list kind of thing. I had a topic list and I said, all right, now here's what you need to do with all the poems and just make a bunch of topics and write poems toward this thing. And again, it was just about this idea of like, okay, I need to anchor it to something that is sensory because otherwise I'm just going to be writing into a sentiment that's going to be a nebulous cloud of nothing. And so that's really been very useful with that. And maybe with, unlocking more memories, I'll do a bit more of that with this third book. There are some things that are reaching back a bit again. And I just try to make sure I write them down when it happens and use that as like the nugget of like, this is the image that will form kind of the structure of something, or maybe it doesn't. And I just write it down and, it hangs out my phone forever.
Yeah, Emily Dickinson was actually a big influence of mine when I was a very young poet as an undergrad in college. And we were reading her in class, and then I kind of took off on my own, kind of trying to emulate her. I was writing my little Emily Dickinson poems, trying to like figure out how does she make so much happen in that little space, and trying to follow like her rhythms, so I actually like won this little college prize for one of my Emily Dickinson poems that was of course about death. But I also realized in time that I was spending a lot of time masking everything and trying to figure out ways of talking about things that I didn't feel like I could talk about. And so emulating poems and mimicking poets that I admired was kind of my way into learning my craft, but also avoiding that felt taboo to me, mainly all about adoption. And so it's taken me a long time to kind of break out, and read like the Crow poem, like I read tonight, feels, very freeing. And yet in one way, I was looking at all those tiny little sections and it's like, I'm still trying to make all this stuff happen in these little tiny spaces, even if I'm stringing them together, kind of like pearls, 25 of them to make that poem. So yeah, while I'm kind of taking off the mask, so to speak, a lot of times now in my work, I'm still trying to, use what I learned so long ago to craft everything that I write.
Thank you for that. And I'm sorry for my camera being off. I'm having an unstable connection moment. We've all been there. You're all able to hear me? Is that
yes?
Okay, great.
Yeah, no problem.
Well, we are nearing the end of our time together, and I so appreciate these reflections. I do want to ask you one more question. Meg, you started us off with a very timely poem. Can you tell us again what the name of that poem and the author of that poem?
Yeah, it's Cameron Penny was a fourth grader in Michigan in September 2001. The poem does not have a title, but I believe that the class assignment was, the class was given the first line, which is, if you are lucky enough in this life. And Cameron Penny, well, I don't know if that's a boy or a girl or how that person identifies, but Cameron took that first line and wrote this amazing poem from there, you know.
Thank you for starting off the night that way. That was such a really wonderful way to honor what is probably, you know, foremost on everybody's minds right now. This has been a particularly dark couple of weeks for our country, the shootings in Buffalo and Texas. So, you know, I mean, just the feeling that with events like those in such close succession, it can feel like there's not even a chance to grieve.
Yeah.
And so I guess I'm wondering, as poets, you know, how do you think poetry can help in times like this? I hope you think poetry can help in times like this.
My first poetry mentor and professor said the act of poetry is a political act, and his wife was from Poland during the Iron Curtain days, and it was you know, they were living, the Polish poets were being beaten regularly, and I think also when we see what's going on in Eastern Europe now, that the people who speak out, and poets speak out, and all of us here have made some serious political statements, and I think this is what we are called to do, and I think it makes a difference.
Yeah, I think in terms of, I mean, books are being banned, right? Books that tell the truth are being banned. That says a lot on its own.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the interesting things about poetry in particular, which this is not to say that other genres don't do this as well, but the ways in which this idea I like to think about is like how poems defamiliarize language for us, right? We're always pushing toward this goal of writing the unique thing because everything's been written. So how do we write it in the way that no one's seen before? And that all that's kind of based in imagination, this idea that there is more beyond reality, even if we're writing very much in a way that is not speculative. And I think that that's the dangerous part of it, right? Like we can help people imagine a world that is not what it is now, and people will strive for it through the poems. And beyond all that, I think it's, you know, it's a record. It's a record of things. And as we again see from, you know, the banning of books and what information is being withheld from young people about the truth of the history of this country, we have to continue to keep records, you know, whether that is, you know, in the more documentary sense of poetics or in the more witness side that is feeling more into the sentiment of the time than the, you know, specifics of the what happened. Mm-hmm. We need that, because if we're not writing it, it's not going to be there for future generations to remember and to understand how this was something that was engaged with through the arts in various forms. And again, you know, as Denise says, you know, poetry is a political thing. The fact that we can continue to write, and if there's ever a point where we are coerced to stop writing, that's a big thing. So the fact that we can continue to do so now, for me, really puts an obligation within our hands to do so.
Agreed. And I would like to add that Indigenous peoples and nations on this continent have survived as cultural entities for 500 years, despite every possible obstruction and assault. And one of the most critical ways they've done this is through their cultural heritage, which is their literary traditions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's true that when things get difficult, even people who don't normally read poetry turn to poems, you know? And I think I always like to tell people, I think poetry is the path to world peace, you know, because in that how it doesn't tell about experience, but it recreates experience so that you feel what the writer feels. And in that way, you know, no matter where the poet is, like you have those moments where you go, oh, you too? You know, I thought I was the only one who felt that way, you know? And I think that's part of what we're looking for, you know, is that connection, that human connection that we feel when we read the poem. And in writing poems, at least for me, it's never really been about healing, although I think for some people that it is a healing act for them. But for me, it's always been, at least I feel as if I have some control over how the story is told, what I'm going to say, what I'm going to leave out, you know, and you have control over maybe a story that you never had control over before. So in that, it's at least empowering, if not healing. So it works both ways, as both the reader, experiencer of poems, and the writer of poems too.
We have a lot of people in the chat. I can tell just, you know, nodding their heads in agreement with all of this. And I want to thank you for leaving us on that very hopeful note. It's been just a wonderful evening with you three. I don't want it to end, and yet we're at time. So I want to say thank you again to this incredible group of poets. I might lose connection again, so I'm going to turn my video off. Sorry. Meg Kearney, Quentin Collins, Denise Lowe, it has been such a pleasure to have you. And a big thank you to tonight's audience. We've loved being with you. We're popping links in the chat once more so that you can make sure to go find the books of these poets and buy them. We do hope that you will join us next month for our phosphorescence reading. The June phosphorescence reading is with Anna Telhami and Stacy Simachek. And you can find out more about that in the link that we're placing in the chat. I'd also like to just mention that I think we have a lot of poets here in the house tonight, which is really fabulous. We're so glad to have you. And in the coming month, early in June, we're going to be getting out our call for proposals for poets who want to be part of our Tell It Slant Poetry Festival in its 10th year this September. And we would just love to see a submission from you. So in order to stay tuned to all of that, you can sign up for the museum's mailing list. If you do that, you'll also be among the first to hear about the date for the museum's summertime grand reopening, which is coming. And we're so excited to announce that next month, that date next month. So go ahead and check out emilydickinsonmuseum.org to learn more about that, or to make a donation in support of our free programs like this one. Thank you once again, everybody. Until we see you again, we hope you take really good care of each other and of yourselves. And good night.
Thank
Thanks,
you so
everybody.
much, Brooke, and everyone, Denise and Q. It's been an honor.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much, everybody.
Good night, all.
Such a great night.
Everybody.
Good night.
Thank you, everyone.
Night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Meg. Thank you, Meg.